Anthony Elmore. I live in Memphis, Tennessee. I am best known in Memphis, Tennessee as the 5-time World Karate Kickboxing Champion. It was in 1987 where we wrote, produced, directed, and starred in the first movie of anyone, black or white. We produced the first independent film called The Contemporary Gladiator. There are 4 words that describe the reason we are producing this video. Number 1, education. Number 2, entertainment. Number 3, enlightenment. Number 4, inspiration. And boy, do I have an inspiration for you today. My story is titled, quote, Orange Mound, America's Black Community. You see, the father of African American history, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, said, quote, those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration which comes from the teachings of biography and history. What our goal today is to give particularly those who live in Orange Mound, but also Black America, the inspiration which comes from the teachings of biography and history. You see, in Kwanzaa celebration, the Ngugu Sava, there is a word called Kuji Chakalia. You see, in the second principle of Kwanzaa, it means self-determination. It's a call to African Americans to define their own cultural identity and values, and do not allow others to do it for them. You see, Kuji Chakalia emphasizes the right and responsibility to define oneself, name oneself, create for oneself, and speak for oneself. You see, our community called Orange Mound, we have every right to define ourselves. We call Orange Mound America's Black Community because we here at 1035 Sims associate our community to our Afro-Indigenous heritage in America. You see, Americans are mound building culture. You see, the builders of the mounds in the United States were people from West Africa. You see, in 1310, Abukabare, king of the ancient empire of Mali, led 25,000 colonists to settle in the New World, to settle right in America. You see, research has yielded information that the Malian explorer colonists left beautiful mound structures and writings. See, the result indicate that African and American mound, modernly speaking, built some of the mounds along the Mississippi River. Now, let me share with you this story with you. You see, in 1970, I started to learn what is called Old Japanese Shotokan Karate while in Hamilton High School in Memphis. I led the first 18-year-old voter registration in Tennessee, and my nickname, it's in our yearbook, Hamilton High School yearbook in 1971. I was called Biodon Bashi Oyowo. You see, I want to show you a picture of me in my signature old Japanese karate backstands. You see, I live by a way that the Japanese call the Bushido Code, the way of the warrior, whereas I would practice martial arts. Clearly, in 1974, let me share with you one of my karate practicing areas. I would march up and down these mountains in a community called French Fort. Now, French Fort is kind of like off Crump Avenue, just right at the Mississippi River. What you are seeing is me on top of an Indian mound looking at the Mississippi River. You will see me starting up the mound, and you will see me on top of the mound. It is written that this is where Hernando de Soto first came to this area. There is some history here that white people do not talk about. We show you the Metal Museum, and let's tell you why white people do not talk about this area. Let me show you a picture about this area. Look at these black Union soldiers and explain why many whites do not talk about this area. See, this area was called Fort Pickering, an unknown and untold Black Memphis history. See, we are not told that this area is associated to our Black Native African ancestry or the remarkable untold Black Memphis history. We learn stories about the Civil War. See, unknown and untold is that the first soldiers to fight in the Civil War were black soldiers from Memphis. See, I want to show you a picture of a white man taken here in Memphis in 1862. Do you recognize this 40-year-old white man? This 40-year-old white man is Major General Ulysses S. Grant, who is recognized for leading the Union Army to victory against the Confederacy, then later becoming the 18th President of the United States from 1869 to 1877. See, it was Ulysses S. Grant who signed the 15th Amendment giving African Americans the right to vote. Now, let me tell you more about the story. You see, it was on June 6, 1862, the Battle of Memphis happened on the Mississippi River. See, citizens were on top of the river watching the Union Army defeat the Confederate Army. The Confederate Army was no match for the Union Navy. Now, let me explain how Ulysses S. Grant comes into the picture. See, unknown and untold, it is not known how important Memphis was in the Civil War. You see, everything happened on the Mississippi River. See, if the Union could take Memphis, they could cut off supply lines. See, Memphis was so important that Major General Ulysses S. Grant established Fort Pickering. See, Fort Pickering was the Confederate fort, but after losing the Battle of Memphis, the whites ran to Mississippi and the Union Army took over Fort Pickering. Now, Memphis was so important that Major General Grant established Fort Pickering, whereas he made General Sherman the commander. You see, when the Union Army defeated the Confederates on the Mississippi, whites ran to Mississippi, leaving farms and slaves who, when the slaves left, they were called contraband. Now, 6 months later, now remember, they defeated the Confederates on June 6, 1862. But 6 months later, on January 1st, 1863, Abraham Lincoln not only issued the Emancipation Proclamation freeing blacks from slavery, he allowed black men to join the Army and the Navy. Black was stationed right here where you see me with an Indian statue, whereas the history goes untold that in this areas, black families lived at Fort Pickering, where our black history goes untold. You see, whereas after winning the Battle of Memphis, the Union soldiers dropped off a black man by the name of Robert R. Church. Now, this is in 1862, who would later become the South's first black millionaire, who would later buy the first bond to reestablish Memphis. See, unknown and untold, the first blacks joined the Union Army came from right here in Memphis, stationed at Fort Pickering. You see, in 1862, when the whites left Memphis, foreigners who were Irish ran the city of Memphis. In 1862, the white Confederate residents fled to Mississippi. This left Memphis with the majority white Irish immigrants. The Irish became the mayor, the police chief, and the fire chief in charge of running Memphis. They got into a confrontation with some black soldiers in the Union Army. To make a long story short, Alice Mars went on a black killing spree for 3 days, known as the Memphis Massacre. Just look it up. Look it up. You see, this story of the killing and raping and robbing and looting, this is a part of Memphis history. Things were so bad in Memphis that Congress had to pass the 14th Amendment, whereas it says citizens born or naturalized in America had equal protection under the Constitution. This happened because of the horrors in Memphis. This was called the Memphis Massacre of 1866 that happened almost in the same area where Dr. Martin Luther King was killed in Memphis. You see, now let's get back to Orange Mound. Whereas there are 2 black churches who have a history starting in 1879. Now, let's go back. Grant was the president from 1869 to 1877. Now, a deal was struck after the election of Rutherford B. Hayes, who was a Republican. Now, a deal was struck, and what happened was this compromise was struck that the Union soldiers would no longer be stationed in the South during Reconstruction. They had to leave. Now, what happened was, after Reconstruction, the whites went back to terrorizing blacks and making them slaves. Now, a fortune happened in Memphis. Now, this Reconstruction ended in 1877, but a fortune happened in Memphis that goes unknown and untold. You see, in 1878, the yellow fever hit Memphis. It was so bad that 25,000 whites left in 3 days because, see, the yellow fever was malaria. Now, malaria was killing white people, but it did not kill black people. It made them sick. But malaria, it was malaria, which was the yellow fever, and it didn't kill black people. So, in Memphis, Tennessee, the majority of population were black people. And it was Robert R. Church who used his money and influence to hire the black militias to become the police, the fire, and blacks ran the city of Memphis because whites had left and blacks were in the majority. Now, this area, what we call Orange Mound, was in the county of Shelby. Now, let me explain something. Do you believe that the community or the people who purchased the land? Now, you got to realize there are 2 churches, Mount Pisgah and Mount Moriah, whose history goes back to 1879. Now, the Civil War began in 1861. Blacks were freed in 1863. Let's go 20 years later to 1883. You have to know that blacks knew the name of their community, or did they continue with having the name called Orange Mound, which is purported to be named after the Theatrical plantation because they planted Osage orange trees. We do not believe that. You see, let's move to 1877. You see, where blacks started one of the first black towns in America called what? Mound Bayou. You see, here are some of the cities that use the name Mound. There's Mound City, Arkansas, Mound City, Illinois, Mound National Cemetery, Mound City, Kansas, Mound City, Missouri, Mound City, South Dakota, Big Mound City. There's, see, all over America, they used the word mound because mound was associated with Native Americans. Now, originally, in 1310, Mansa King Abu Bakr of the Mali Empire set sail from his kingdom in West Africa to visit lands across the Atlantic. In this exemplary force, there were 25,000 men and women of ships. Over time, the Malayans were nativized, and they were our first black Native Americans. You see, in Africa, African cultures hold orange to a important significance. See, orange carries various meanings. It is often associated with joy and celebration, seen in vibrant colors, decorations on festivals, wedding and joyous events. Orange symbolizes the harvest seasons, and during wedding festivals and other joyous events, orange represents an abundance of prosperity, reflecting the fertility of the land. It also has spiritual connotations used in rituals and ceremonies to invoke special meanings of honor ancestors. Additionally, orange is the prominent color in African arts and crafts, from textiles to beadwork, showing the continent's rich artistic heritage. In some cultures, orange is believed to do healing properties and provide protection, using amulets and charms to promote well-being. Overall, the color orange plays a vital role in the daily lives, traditions, and artistic expressions of various African communities. Now, what does this mean? It means that we have the name orange. Orange represents Africa. See, orange represents Africa, and the mounds connect us with our ancient African country in Mali, where there was Timbuktu, where we had the University of Korea. The fact is, the name Orange Mound is associated with Africa, and we in Orange Mound are America's black community.